Lord Trimble was First Minister of Northern Ireland, leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. In 1998, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, together with John Hume, for their efforts to find a peaceful solution to the conflict in Northern Ireland. The Israeli public had the privilege to get to know Lord Trimble when he was appointed as international observer in the Tirkel Commission investigating the attack on the Gaza flotilla. Lord Trimble, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Can you point at the one thing that surprised you most regarding Israel and Israelis while working on the investigation of the flotilla?
Well, there are several things, I suppose, but one thing stands out most. There was a senior ministerial meeting on the 26th of May, shortly beforehand. It's a group of 7, at which there was a detailed discussion of the operation and basically the final clearance given for it. There happened to have been what would otherwise have been a routine ministerial meeting involving 20 ministers on the 1st of June, to which the IDF and others went and gave a detailed debrief on the situation. Both counting as ministerial meetings. We were supplied with the transcript of the meetings, every word that was said. And in our system, that would completely unheard of. With regard to ministerial meetings or cabinet meetings at home, you'd be lucky if you even saw the brief minutes of the meeting, but to actually get a transcript. I did say to someone afterwards that you really want to adopt the same approach that people writing opera libretti do, that when people are speaking or singing simultaneously, you put a bracket down the margin, because quite clearly, particularly on the second second transcript, lots of people were speaking at the same time, and it was really quite sort of zigzagging down the page, trying to follow the thread of it.
Is it good news or bad news to Israeli society?
I think it's excellent.
Did it bother you that some of our leaders found it hard to assume responsibility over their own decisions?
Look, I don't want to get into details, no name, no pact drill, but this is one of the besetting sins of politicians.
And did you find a difference in those terms between the way the politicians appeared in front of you and the way that the officers, the military officers, did?
Well, yes, obviously there were differences in the sense that you could feel naturally the politicians were addressing audiences outside as well as in, and the military people, who were pretty impressive, I have to say, were obviously more focused on the details of the operation.
Now, I must tell you that I was surprised to hear from you just before we came in that you had no doubt or no second guessing, no questions asked between your friends, your peers, your community with regard to your decision to accept the nomination. Didn't you have the slightest doubt as to the fact that you might be used, even abused, as a cleansing material to grant legitimacy to the whole commission and to the whole investigation?
Well, to a certain extent, that was the object of the exercise. I mean, the reason for having 2 international observers, the other one was Ken Watkins, who did a very good job in terms of his contribution to the operation. I mean, we were there in order to give, as it were, an enhanced credibility. So that people who might be inclined to say, oh, this was an Israeli commission looking into the actions of the Israelis, and of course they exonerated them and all the rest of it, but say, well, what do you expect? The fact that you had then some people who were, and I think, well, for myself, I believed I was independent, and quite sure Ken was equally independent. I think the whole object of the exercise was to give added credibility.
So you had no second thoughts, no doubts as to whether to accept the nomination?
It's the sort of thing, when it comes along, my reaction is, if something like that comes along, you have to have a pretty good reason for not accepting.
Really? Or
Yeah.
to have a good reason for accepting?
No, I put it the other way.
The other way around.
Yeah.
Never regretted the fact that you did?
No, oh no, it's been a very interesting exercise. And as I said to you when we were chatting earlier, amongst the circle of people that I move in, nobody said to me, you were doing the wrong thing.
Now, with regard to the report itself, which, as you might know, was regarded as slightly mild by some people, do you think that once the decision was made to stop the flotilla, once the decision was made to enforce the blockade on the Gaza Strip, wasn't there a better way to do it?
In hindsight, yes, there was.
Only in hindsight?
Well, I don't want to go too far on that. Funnily enough, the better way of doing it that would have been available to them was to use high-powered hoses to wash people off the top of the boat. And that capability was actually present because there was a vessel, an Israeli Navy vessel, which designed for dealing with fires, which had that capability. Unfortunately, at the time of the engagement, it was quite some distance away on a slow vessel and could not have caught up in time. Now, there might be a mild criticism about that, and I rather suspect if there's any repeat, then we'll find that a vessel appropriately equipped will be deployed accordingly. There was possibly a degree of complacency in the sense that other ships had come and had been dealt with and they had not encountered the violent resistance that occurred on the Mavi Marmara. Though the thing that changed the Mavi Marmara from other circumstances was the resistance, which involved, the main weapon involved was using to cut away the rods that held up the stem. So the impression of looking at the people who boarded, they're not armed, but they then equipped themselves with something. If you hit a person with an iron bar repeatedly over the head, it's potentially lethal. So they then equipped with some things which were potentially lethal, which were not brought on the ships. Now that's maybe something that it's difficult to see how that could have been anticipated.
And you found a decision as to when, how, and to what extent to use lethal force. The decisions made on board of the Mavi Marmara were impeccable.
For me, the crucial issues were the question of the legality of the operation, right? And so the question is the situation vis-a-vis Israel and Gaza something more akin to an international conflict than an internal one? It's more akin to an international one, so therefore a blockade is legitimate. If there is a legitimate blockade, then you're entitled to enforce it and to use whatever force is necessary. And we're, in the recent discussion, are getting into the operational aspects of it, which at the end of the day, the politicians have to trust the senior military people on the operational aspects of it. It's not for the politicians to dictate exactly how an operation is carried out.
I wonder, though, to what extent one might see the flotilla as a metaphor to the whole conflict. And now I want to leave aside the intricate details of the flotilla itself and the investigation and the committee and the report. They feel victims, we feel threatened. Each side operates accordingly, thereby intensifying the sense of victimhood and threat on the other side. Take it from there.
Yes, I mean, you could look at it as a propaganda exercise set up
on their side
by IHH and the people in Turkey who were supporting IHH, that it was a propaganda exercise. And in a sense, it worked for them because the initial propaganda response, the initial public response, was to say, well, with so many dead people on one side and not on the other side, something, pretty nasty has happened. However, it's interesting to note that the Israeli agencies got a version, put information into the public domain very quickly, and remarkably, within a week or two, the BBC Panorama programme, not noted for its sympathy with Israel, did a programme on it, which virtually, exonerated the IDF forces.
Tell me about it. They got the whole exclusive material, which we Israeli press were begging for, but the BBC got it first. I want to spend the last few minutes that we have, and I know it's too little, to talk about the Northern Ireland experience, which so many people in our area think of it as something to learn from, and you've been so instrumental and so central in solving that decades-old conflict. Books and dissertations can be written about it, and we have just a couple of minutes. Is there a lesson to be learned from the Israeli, from the Palestinian point of view?
I advise people, don't look for lessons. By all means, look at other situations, see what happened. You may get insights. Looking at other situations will give you, I think, a greater degree of confidence in dealing with your own, but you have to deal with your own circumstances, and you have to give full weight to your own particular circumstances and not privilege some so-called lesson from somewhere else over those.
And Hamas is certainly not the IRA and so forth. But still, from the point of view of a political decision maker, you have been one at the high time of this war being on the edge of ending. Was there a point in time, and I'm sure that President Peres can testify to that, there was a point in time in 1987 when he knew that peace can be made with Jordan. There was a point in time in 1993 when he knew that some things can be changed with the Palestinians. There was a moment of grace. We had a moment of grace. Unfortunately, it was missed. It was not used. Can you testify to the moment of grace in your story?
Well, there was a point, I think it was in 1974, I remember having a conversation with a colleague in which we were just talking about the outcome of the situation we have, and where he was spelt out to me in broad terms what the outcome would be, and accurately as it turned out. But the reason why we didn't achieve anything of that nature in 1974 was that in 1974, the bulk of unionists regarded this as a law and order issue which should be dealt with, and a very significant number of nationalists thought that they could achieve their ends by violence. Both sides, you could say, were seeking a victory over the other. It was only when both sides, or critical mass on both sides, accepted that they could not achieve an outright victory and that they needed a compromise that things became possible. Now, different people would have reached that point at different times, and by 1998 we had enough people in that ballpark to do something.
But does it have anything to do, or does it have much to do with the identity of the leaders in key intersections of the political decision makers? Did it matter the fact that you had Tony Blair in the UK, you had Bill Clinton in the US, you had yourself in Northern Ireland? Did it really make a difference?
Well, some of those did. Some of them didn't make much difference, and one thing that did help was having Ian Paisley outside. Because otherwise he might have plopped it.
So what would you tell Israelis who are worried that there is no one to talk to, there is no partner, every engagement, every opportunity was missed? We used to say that the Palestinians don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. How can we brace ourselves to a better future?
Well, I think it all comes back down to this issue of whether you are prepared to accept a compromise, whether you accept the existence of the other. And I think you have to constantly be probing whether people are prepared to accept the existence of the other. And that business of accepting this cuts both ways. Cuts both ways. I mean, it has implications for Israelis, it's got implications for Palestinians. I think you have to be constantly asking the question, are people prepared to do that? Is there then something to talk about? Rather than just assume, because there's been past failures, that there is no possibility of proceeding. You've always got to be prepared.
But I read somewhere that the advocacy group in which you're a member, trying to be advocates for Israel in the international community, that you're not sure that the compromise on our side is the right thing to do, that you're not sure that giving away sweets to the Palestinians is something that will bring us somewhere.
I can remember Seamus Mellon, who's in John Hume's party, saying at one point to the British government when the talks were going on, he said, come on, bring out the sweetie bag. You know you're going to bring out a sweetie bag. Well, of course, you know, sweetie bags are not what one should do. You should be looking at the substance of the matter. And the substance of the matter is what really matters on that. And I think on that, you shouldn't make up your mind in advance what other people are going to do. You may know what you're going to do. Well, most of the time one hopes one knows what one's going to do. Sometimes one surprises oneself. But you mustn't assume that you know what other people are going to do. And you mustn't go into a situation, as it were, with your mind fixed about the other people you're dealing with. They might surprise you.
Knowing Israel better than you knew before, being here more than you have been before, loving Israel, I sense. Are you optimistic with regard to the future of this country?
Oh, yes. But I'm a natural optimist.
And you're in minority. Lord Trimble, thank you very much.